Hello, everyone. My name is James Chang, and I am Director of the Duck Career Network with the University of Oregon Alumni Association. And on behalf of our staff here in the Eugene campus, thank you so much for participating in this Duck Insider webinar. The focus is careers in politics and public policy, and I am thrilled to be joined by three outstanding alums and also a colleague of mine here at the Ford Alumni Center. So Camille, can I have you introduce yourself very briefly?
Yes, hello, my name is Camille Ogden, and I'm the Program Coordinator of the Duck Career Network, and I'm also a Duck alumni.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Camille. As a quick introduction, for those of you who are not familiar with the Duck Career Network, we're a program within the University of Oregon Alumni Association that is focused on harnessing the power of the alumni network, specifically for career and professional success. Many of you know that we cheer on our Ducks, on the field of sports. There are amazing lectures by our faculty, but the Duck Career Network really focuses on facilitating networking among our entire alumni population with the focus of career and professional success. Today, we are thrilled to be able to share with you the insights of three alums, one who is up in Portland, two who are in the Washington, D.C. area, and I will have them introduce themselves in just a moment. But before I do that, I just want to do a quick acknowledgement of the members of the University of Oregon Alumni Association. We would not be able to do programs like this without you. Your annual support, your life membership allows us to keep connections with all of our fantastic alumni, and for the Duck Career Network, again, to make the network stronger. Our goal is to make our alums champions and cheerleaders, ambassadors and advocates for the University of Oregon to make it stronger, because the stronger the U of O is, the greater the value your degree from the university is. So again, thank you so much for being part of this program. So let me start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves. We're thrilled to have Michael and Megan in DC, Travis in Portland. So maybe I can have Travis, if you would please introduce yourself, your name, your role, what you studied here, and this will just at least kick us off. Thanks so much, Travis.
I'm from Springfield, Oregon, born and raised. I attended the University of Oregon and graduated in 2005. I studied history and international studies and also earned a minor in Latin American studies. After graduating from the U of O, I actually moved to Washington, D.C., and I interned for Congressman Peter DeFazio for 3 months and did various tasks, took constituents on tours of the Capitol building and answered phone calls and answered emails, did research for the congressman and his staff for a couple of months, had to pay my way. It's an unpaid internship. After that internship, I returned to Eugene, Oregon, and I worked for the family business, and I traveled around Central America and did some backpacking, and then I moved to London, and I earned my master's degree from the London School of Economics and Environmental Policy and International Development, and I studied climate change and ended up writing my dissertation on climate change policy in the state of Oregon and its implementation by the Department of Environmental Quality. After London, I moved to Washington, D.C., back and worked for Congressman Peter DeFazio as a legislative assistant. I worked for him doing different legislative issues, Social Security, I did senior issues. I did a lot of domestic policy, educational issues, and worked with the University of Oregon before eventually working my way up as a senior legislative policy person, where I got to do natural resource issues, forestry issues, energy issues, my true passion. It took me a couple of years to do that. I worked for him in his personal office in Washington, D.C. for about 5 years before serving with him on the House Natural Resources Committee, where he served as the chairman, or excuse me, the ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee for about 1.5 years. And then he moved to a new position and a new committee where he was a ranking member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where I moved and I worked for him for about 6 months on the T&I committee, as we call it in DC. And I worked on roads, bridges, port issues, clean water issues as they pertain to the Pacific Northwest. In total, I was in Washington, D.C. for about 8 years before recently moving back to Portland. I moved back to Portland in August and assumed a new position, President and CEO of the American Forest Resource Council here in Portland. What I do is I represent forest products industry representatives in Montana and Idaho and Washington, Oregon, California. And we work for healthy forests and forest restoration on public lands throughout the region. And I've been in this role for about 5 or 6 months. I've been traveling and meeting the members and really enjoying a new experience and building new skill sets in my new capacity.
Megan, could you please introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So I graduated from the University of Oregon in 2007 with degrees in environmental studies and international studies. I moved out to Washington, D.C. As soon as I graduated and started out at a bipartisan public affairs firm. And then in 2009, I started as a staff assistant for Congressman Peter DeFazio on Capitol Hill. And I've been with the Congressman ever since. And I currently am a senior legislative aide that advises the Congressman on trade, agriculture, small business, foreign affairs, defense, and natural resources policy.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Michael, could you please round out the panel and introduce yourself?
Of course. Thanks, James. Michael Hayes. I'm from Corvallis, Oregon. I graduated from University of Oregon in 2009 with a degree in economics and minors in business and Spanish. I came out to D.C. shortly after graduating. Actually, Megan helped me get my first internship out here in Congressman Peter DeFazio's office and was hired shortly thereafter. Started out writing constituent correspondence for the Congressman and progressed to handling a portfolio of legislative issues there. After about 5 years in the congressional office, I took a new role with the Consumer Technology Association. Here I'm manager of government affairs, and I'm responsible for our government affairs work on intellectual property issues, on sharing economy issues like Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Yelp, and new innovative companies like that, and also our high-skilled immigration policy. So thanks again for having us on here, James.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. So let me turn it back to Travis, because to tell the story a little bit better, Travis was referred to me by a colleague within this Ford Alumni Center who had recently met Travis, and Travis had expressed interest in reconnecting with the university. So Travis, can you tell us a little bit about how at this particular point in time you became excited about being more involved in the U of O?
Sure. Well, I'm a passionate duck. Attending University of Oregon really changed my life and my trajectory. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, and my experience at the University of Oregon was extraordinary. It opened up a lot of opportunities, going to London to study for my master's, and eventually going to Washington, D.C. and working for 8 years, and really a dream job. It was incredible. And I had the fortune of meeting Michael and Megan there, and we worked as a team on legislation impacting, frankly, the University of Oregon through educational issues, but our state and the 4th Congressional District. And, before now, I never really thought I had anything to offer back as an alumni. I was building my career and looking for opportunities. And now I feel like I'm in a place in my life where, I've been in the profession for 8 years, and I have a recipe that seemed to have worked for me, and Michael and Megan have similar recipes, and maybe we can offer some input on people who are considering a different career or looking to get involved in public policy.
Wonderful. Again, we're thrilled to have your involvement, your commitment, and your passion as well. And Travis, maybe tell me a little bit more about, again, I was thrilled that you were able to bring Michael and Megan on board. So what about the three of you really made you think that you had a neat complementary story to share?
We all have different trajectories. I started for Mr. DeFazio after graduate school. I worked with him in his personal office. I transitioned, as I mentioned, to the committees and worked for him on 2 different committees and did committee work. And then I eventually moved back to Oregon. I'm here now in Portland and working for a trade association. I think that's pretty typical for a congressional staffer, of maybe working for a member from their hometown or from their state, working in Washington, D.C., gaining a skill set, and either moving back home and applying those skills at home, or moving to the private sector, or staying in Washington, D.C. and developing that skill base even further. And I think Megan, Michael, and I all have those different trajectories. I went to D.C. and have come back. Michael worked in D.C. For Congressman DeFazio in his personal office, and then moved off the Hill in a different professional opportunity. And Megan has stayed with Congressman DeFazio and is continuing to work as a senior legislative policy person. So I think that we reflect the different trajectories of how public policy folks in D.C. End up working on the Hill and off the Hill.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, Megan, if my math is right, you've been with Congressman DeFazio's office for about 6 or 7 years. Can you also tell me how your work there has changed over time and how your responsibilities have morphed?
Sure. Well, it's very interesting because I started out giving tours of the Capitol, U.S. Capitol, to constituents as a staff assistant. So I started out at the most basic entry-level position. I answered phones all day and talked to constituents, was giving tours, but I also wanted to grow and learn more about the issues and become a legislative aide. So I started helping the more senior staff like Travis when he was in LA with either doing research or attending briefings. And then I moved up and was promoted to legislative assistant. And when I was first promoted, I handled a different issue set than I do now. I started doing, education issues, agriculture, trade. Those have always been in my portfolio. But as people have moved in and out of the office and transitioned, and the congressman has become, a ranking member on natural resources, then he became a ranking member on transportation and infrastructure. My issues have changed, and so I've got to do sort of more of what I want to. I think I have right now the dream portfolio. I'm getting to do foreign affairs and defense issues, which I've always been interested in, and I'm doing some of the natural resources policies since Travis left the office. So I've really been able to sort of get a feel for a lot of different issue areas and pick up where other people left off, and I've learned a lot that way.
Wonderful, Megan. I also know that there's some students on this webinar, attending this webinar, so it'll be great for them to hear how wherever you start, there's a great opportunity to grow, advance, as people see your skills, your passion. Again, thanks for telling your story. So, Michael, as Travis mentioned, you've now moved off the Hill. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you knew that DC was the right place for you, and what was it about your current role that attracted you to pursue something a little bit different?
Absolutely. DC is a place that, as Megan mentioned, provides so much opportunity for education and for growth, for especially a young professional. You're able to come to Capitol Hill and able to take an entry-level role, and you're suddenly surrounded by as many mentors as you want to have. Everyone else on Capitol Hill has a vested interest. Senior staff have a vested interest in making sure that staff in other offices, more junior staff, know the issues they're working on because they want your boss to co-sponsor a bill or join an effort. And so if as a young staffer you're savvy and interested in learning, you can go any direction that you wish. And it's up to you to take advantage of that, but if you insert yourself into some of these policy debates, if you, spend a little bit of time educating yourself on some of these issues, it is amazing how quickly you're able to progress, particularly on Capitol Hill. And that was my story in Congressman DeFazio's office. Was handling a legislative portfolio that included a number of issues, including his technology policy. And one day he called me up. He had been meeting with a local technology company in the district. And he said that the company had got hit by something called a patent troll. And it was the situation where someone was trying to use patent litigation to shake them down, a bogus patent lawsuit, to try to get them to pay up. And he wanted to do something about it. So he told me, Michael, why don't you look into what the Judiciary Committee, the Committee of Jurisdiction over Intellectual Property Issues, why don't you see what they're doing on this and see if I might be able to help out somehow. So, as a good staffer, I do my research, see what's out there. And there wasn't anything. And when the congressman got back to D.C., I told him, we have two options, right? We're either going to have to tell this company that there isn't anything we can do. We're sorry, and the Committee of Jurisdiction, the experts on this, they're not doing anything right now. We'll have to wait for them to take it up. Or, option two, we can figure out how to do something about it and do it. And fortunately, that was the culture of the office. That was something that all of us were lucky to learn early on, is that the congressman and senior staff in that office set a culture of, it wasn't our job to just give lip service to problems. If there was a problem, it was our job to solve it. And so the congressman and I worked together to find the intellectual property experts out there, bring them in, meet with them, find out more about this issue. How do we write a bill on it? Ultimately, that opportunity to bring those people in, his willingness to take on a new issue, led me to work on writing the first bill aimed at dealing with this problem, and partnered with a Republican, Jason Chaffetz, from the state of Utah. And over the years, the issue progressed into a national debate. So this just illustrates the type of opportunity that there is for a relatively young staff person here in DC that may be difficult to obtain somewhere else. As far as moving into my current role, it was never a matter of wanting to leave the congressman's office. It's definitely not something premeditated. As I just mentioned, you have all of the possible opportunity and ability to work on incredible issues there. It was a matter of this opportunity falling in my lap. And the Consumer Technology Association, just a bit of background, represents about 2,200 technology companies, everywhere from little startups to big technology companies, household names, and very well recognized on Capitol Hill. And so this was an opportunity for me to take those intellectual property issues and patent issues and really make a difference on them and be able to push them from a very high-profile position. It's also enabled me to branch out into some other new technology areas to try to replicate the success we've had in bringing patent reform to the fore, with some new issues, sharing economy issues that haven't gained as much national attention. So again, it was never something premeditated. It was never, I want to leave the congressional office. It was a difficult decision, but sometimes opportunities come to you, and I think it helps to take a risk now and then, and you never know where you go with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. A quick little side question. I know within the congressman's office, I'm sure you worked with a number of lobbyists. Now that you are a lobbyist, I guess, how has your perspective changed in terms of the work that you do and your perception before and after your current role?
Yeah, like any career, there are good lobbyists and there are bad lobbyists. And as a congressional staff, you have exposure to the entire spectrum. But by and large, they're good people up there trying to educate congressional offices on behalf of whoever their clients might be. And that's been my experience on this side as well, is that my job is all about education. When I go into an office, when I'm meeting with a congressman, when I'm meeting with his or her staff, it's all about telling them the stories of what our companies are doing. These are the products they're creating. These are the people they employ, and these are the real issues that they're facing. And even better than me telling those stories is when I can facilitate a conversation between a congressman or a senator and the actual employees or the actual startup founders who are living those stories, and they can come to DC and actually personally engage in the political process. I think that there's sometimes people watch House of Cards and other things, and there's this notion that as a lobbyist, you're in there twisting arms and that you're forcing people into uncomfortable positions. And in reality, it's the opposite, right? I would be doing myself and our member companies an extraordinary disservice if I were to ever be misleading someone. Right? You have a certain reputation around here, and if you are known for putting people in an uncomfortable spot or not being the nicest guy in the room, that lives on. It's a fairly small community here in DC, and word gets around. On the other hand, if we're facilitating engaging conversations with really cool startups who are bringing fun technology to Capitol Hill and telling a real passionate story about what they're experiencing, that's something that people take seriously and that they take to heart whether or not they happen to agree with you on the specific issue you're there talking about.
Great. Thanks so much for the insight. So back to you, Travis. Can you tell us a little bit more about the coast to coast to coast journey that you had? Tell us a little bit more about your return to Oregon, being CEO of the American Forest Resource Council, because I know there's some students, it's great to hear many of you had Oregon roots, Willamette Valley roots, and have the idea of conquering, the world and going far away, but coming back is always a question people have. Is it easy? How easy is it to do? How will you be received when you come back? So Travis, can you tell us a little bit more about that return trip?
Yeah, it's extraordinarily difficult for all the reasons that Megan and Michael just
Travis, if you're still there, it turns out that we're not able to hear you. So maybe I'll come back to you on this. Gotta love real-time technology, right? Oh, wait, actually, Travis, is that you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I was saying that it was an extraordinarily difficult decision to move back to Oregon. As Michael and Megan have articulated well, Washington, D.C. is an incredible place and there's extraordinary opportunities for young people. I left the University of Oregon. I felt like I had better opportunities in Washington, D.C. and abroad, and then I needed to develop a skill set before I could come back to Oregon. I always knew that I wanted to come back to Oregon, but I didn't think that I was very marketable, to be honest. I got my professional opportunities immediately after undergraduate school. So my plan was to go somewhere else. I ended up in Washington, D.C. to work for 8 to 10 years and to move back and to use those skills to make a difference here at home. And I still wonder if that decision was the right decision. I feel confident that it was, but Michael and Megan can attest to the work that they do is incredible, helping your hometown representative serve over 100,000 constituents and helping them solve their problems, their security problems, their Medicare problems, helping rural communities. That's really something that I'm passionate about. Moving back to Portland was a bit of a gamble in terms of giving up that lifestyle and that career, which I found extraordinarily intellectually stimulating, to do something different, to advocate from a different angle. And I love what I do. It's different, but it was a choice that I made because I felt like it furthered my professional opportunities. Instead of a staffer working for a member of Congress, now I run an association and I have to run a budget and I manage 13 people, and there are new skill sets that I'm learning and developing that I think are important to the trajectory of my career.
Excellent. And we're very happy to have you back in the States. So let me go to Megan. Something that was also mentioned a little bit earlier, I think by Michael, was just that you're surrounded by so many senior staff, by colleagues who are cheering for your success, who want to help you. Can you tell us a little bit more about mentoring, that whether it's formal or informal mentoring, and also how that has affected the work that you've done?
Sure. So when I was a student at U of O, I thought, probably like a lot of students, that I knew everything, I didn't need help. Once I was going to graduate, I was just going to move to DC and get my dream job. And I realized very quickly after graduation that I knew nothing, and I really did need help from other people. So I think finding that perfect mentor and establishing those relationships and keeping up with those relationships is one of the most important things you can do for your career. When I was at U of O, near my graduation, I actually used the Career Counseling Center. So that was my first mentor was there, and he helped me with my resume, gave me advice on moving across the country, on jobs and politics. And then when I moved to DC, I came out here without any job leads, which I wouldn't recommend for everyone. But I ended up, a cousin of someone that I knew that was living here had just graduated as well and was going through a temp agency, which I hadn't even thought about going through a temp agency. And she was offered a job with a public affairs firm and, said, it's not really for me. I'm more interested in PR. And she said, but Megan, you might be interested in this. So I went in and went through the temp agency, which temp agencies do a lot of permanent placements too. People don't realize that. And was placed at this public affairs firm. And that was the best place to find mentors, because I just started out, and all these people that had worked at the public affairs firm I was at had worked in politics, had either worked for the White House, had worked on the Hill, and it was a very small firm, and they were all willing to help me. And one of the senior partners in the firm had previously worked for Senator Gordon Smith from Oregon. So, I ended up, he gave me a lot of advice. He started introducing me to Oregonians that lived in the DC area. So I set up coffees and handed out my resume to a bunch of Oregonians. And, a week after I had had an informational interview with someone that my mentor had recommended that I meet, he reached out to me and said, hey, there's an opening in Congressman DeFazio's office. Would you be interested? And I said, yes. I got the job. That job wasn't posted publicly. It really was through my networks that got me a job in the congressman's office. So keeping those mentors and constantly looking for and finding new mentors is pretty important, because they will help you find opportunities. They will make recommendations on your behalf. And now that I've been in DC a while, I've noticed that I'm becoming a mentor to, younger people that are either current students at U of O or that have just moved out here. So it's really rewarding to be in that position, and you have to sort of admit that you can't do everything on your own and you do need help. And those relationships, they do pay off.
Excellent example, Megan. I love hearing the power of the alumni network, or just any network, at work. So, but I think you, like many other students are, or as they graduate, we love instilling a sense of confidence and ambition in our graduates. But it also does take some time, and with help, the whole process is so much easier. So I'm glad that thank you so much for sharing your story, and glad that it worked out so well. So for the next question, back to Michael, talking about DC and the world of politics and public policy, public service being a very small world, can you tell me, maybe tell our audience a little bit more about just how the social and professional network scene has worked for you in the DC area, and if even some of those connections kind of keep you connected to Oregon?
Certainly. Well, as Megan mentioned, at any stage in your career, your ability to build and foster a sincere network, I think, is something that you can't place a value on. You have to put effort into it. It's not one of those things that just happens to you, that mentors fall into your lap, and that people are going to come to your rescue at every move. You really have to foster those relationships and put a certain amount of effort into networking. And sometimes it comes from unexpected places, and I think that's one of the things that I have learned over the years, is that you aren't necessarily always meeting someone in order to further your career. You may encounter someone, and it may be years later down the road that they end up helping you out because you maintain even just a social relationship with them. I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the call that Megan was the one that was able to get me my first internship, my first foot in the door in DC. I met Megan on a study abroad program back in my sophomore year at University of Oregon in Rosario, Argentina. And we kept up a friendship over the course of the next several years with many of the other people from our program. And that later, when I was looking for an opportunity to launch my career in DC, those were some of the connections that I went to, and ultimately that helped me get my foot in the door. As far as networking in DC goes, it's invaluable, right? It's one of these places where I think people underestimate how much of a small town it is. And you can go into an office and make a compelling pitch about any sort of issue that you may be you're trying to advance. And without having some level of personal relationship, your job's going to be a lot harder. And that starts from even getting the appointment, right? You could call the front desk of an office and try to make an appointment with the relevant staff. Or if you've done your social networking, if you've been going to functions, if you've been building relationships, you probably know someone in that office. And they may not be the right person, but you give them a call on their direct line. And next thing you know, they have you in touch with whatever senior staff is that was responsible for the issue. So you can do your job without having a strong network, but one, you're going to expend a lot more effort. It's going to be a lot harder. And two, you're going to progress a lot more slowly. So I can't overstate the importance of, one, putting in an active amount of effort into networking, but two, not trying too hard, right? Sometimes you're just making friends with someone and maintaining a relationship that could end up being fruitful in a professional sense years down the road, and even if it isn't, you got a good friend out of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. Let me make a side comment to our attendees. There's a chance for you to ask questions of the panelists during this webinar. If you are on a full dashboard of the WebEx platform, look for the Q&A tab. If you type in a question there, Camille on our end will be compiling those questions, and we'll ask those, time permitting, in about 10 minutes or so. So feel free to ask a question that we can address right here and right now. But while you're thinking about that, I'll have a couple more questions to ask. I'd like to go maybe ask this question for all three of you, because I think you've presented yourself as very professional, very career-driven, very committed to your work and also to your constituents. But I also really try to emphasize that, life is a balance. So whether, it's in DC, in Portland, in Eugene, I'm curious, what about, either the local tourist things or hobbies? What things have you done in terms of achieving that work-life balance that, frankly, many Oregonians take pride in? So can you have that work-life balance, when you're CEO of a company, when you're in a congressional office in D.C., when you're working with a trade group in D.C.? So Travis, if you wouldn't mind maybe taking a stab at that question.
Sure. I think work-life balance is extraordinarily difficult, especially in the public policy world. I remember, commonly I would probably work 50 or 60 or 70 hours a week. That's pretty common. Even if you weren't in the office 40, 50 hours a week, you're always on your BlackBerry or your cell phone responding to the boss or trying to make things happen after office hours. So that was difficult, but DC is an extraordinary city. It's phenomenal. There's so many opportunities, and I took advantage of them. I mean, I was a history major, so I love the history of Washington, D.C. D.C. is a hub. I mean, you can take a 3-hour train to New York City. You can fly an hour and a half down to Florida. It's centrally located. You can fly to Europe in 5.5 hours. So there were those opportunities of being on the eastern seaboard and kind of those cultural opportunities, vacation opportunities that I really appreciate. Plus, it's a beautiful place. People don't realize that Washington, D.C., not only down, the city, the mall, the Capitol are wonderful, but, it's a 30, 40-minute drive to Virginia and the Shenandoah, and you can drive out into Maryland and rock climb. And so there were a lot of those opportunities. Back here in Portland, as an Oregonian, I mean, there's no place like home. I love it here, and that's part of the reason that I moved back. I wanted to try to have a better work-life balance. I think that I'm slowly accomplishing that. But in my new position, I'm still working long hours, and we have about 95 members in 5 different states. So I'm making the rounds and doing the visits, and that can be challenging and can constrain my schedule a bit. But it's incredibly back home in Portland, and be able to go up to Mount Hood and ski and hike and go over to Bend, and those opportunities are unparalleled.
Wonderful. It's great to have you back. Megan, how have you been able to manage that work-life balance?
Well, I'd agree with Travis. You do work long hours, but DC is sort of a work hard, play hard mentality. I mean, people go out all the time, at all hours of the night, during the week. I mean, if you walk outside, the restaurants are full, even on a Wednesday. And as Michael said, you have to build those social networks. So to me, I enjoy that part of my job. I consider it part of my job, going to receptions and attending events. And it's just something you do, and it's also fun. And I'm pretty involved with the UVO DC Ducks. There's a group out here, and then the Oregon State Society, which is a group of all Oregonians that currently live in DC. We put on events or happy hours about once a month. And for me, that's a fun thing to do. It's volunteer work, but I get to, reconnect with Oregonians, and to me, that makes me feel like I'm at home, even though I'm 3,000 miles away. And then the other thing is just taking advantage of the opportunities just living out on the East Coast. There's so many art museums, concerts, theater. You have access to all that, and access to more than you would in Oregon. I do miss the outdoors because I don't think the Shenandoah really compares to the Mount Hood and other Oregon landmarks, but you adjust, and it's fun to live in a city that's very vibrant, and people are always, busy and in a hurry. So it's a different sort of mentality than Oregonians have. But honestly, I'm concerned if I ever move back to Oregon that I'd have to slow things down a bit and actually take time out and come up with new hobbies, because DC is just so fast-paced. But right now, I'm enjoying that, and I consider it to be, a great place to be as a young person.
Wonderful. Megan, you brought up the DC Ducks. Can you talk a little bit more about what that group what it does and how it does support U of O alums and current students in the DC area?
Sure. So we mainly meet up to watch the football games, and we have a designated bar in downtown DC, and there's one in Virginia too that we all meet up to watch basketball games, football games, and it's just a fun social thing to do. But the DC Ducks also does volunteer work. So there's usually a couple of volunteer events every year. They hold networking happy hours. They pay each year that we raise money to pay for a U of O student to come out and intern in DC, because internships are usually unpaid and living expenses out here are pretty expensive. So that's something that we do, and it's just great to connect, and it's also a great place to look for mentors as well, career mentors.
Yep. And I hear you throw a wonderful holiday party too. So.
Oh yes, there's a holiday party every year and a silent auction, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Excellent. So Michael, with your sort of, go jet set lifestyle, how do you manage to keep sanity and keep balance in your life? Oh, Michael, are you still there, or you might be muted? Well, we can come back to Michael then. So at this point, let me check with Camille to see if there's any particular questions that have come in from our.
I'm back.
Oh, actually, okay. Let's go to Michael.
Sorry about that. I'm on an iPad, and my touch screen was having some troubles.
No problem.
Tapping away, pounding, and nothing's happening. So even at the Consumer Technology Association, sometimes we, like everyone else in the world, have frustrations with technology. We're not immune from this stuff. As far as work-life balance goes, I firmly believe it. It's one of those things that you have to force yourself to have. Otherwise, as Megan and Travis mentioned, it's fast-paced here. There's always more work than you have time for here. And it can take over your life. And you have, when we're on the hill, you have BlackBerries and your iPhone, whatever you have, and it's with you all the time, and it's easy just to get stuck into this idea that you could always be accomplishing something. There's always another task to check off. Just force yourself to let it go sometimes. My wife and I always make a priority to take international trips or domestic trips, several times throughout the year. Just so that we can escape, and there's a good excuse to not be on your phone and go experience something else, go try something new. But even domestically, even when you're here in town, as Megan and Travis mentioned, there's so much to do, and honestly, you would be missing out if you weren't taking advantage of everything here in DC. Brand new restaurants, interesting things, museums opening up every day. Just recently down the street from us, this little hole-in-the-wall jazz club opened up, and you can go there a couple days of the week, kind of off nights, and hear wonderful music of people that usually play high-profile acts. And so it's the sort of thing that you miss if you're not in a big city like this, and it would be a shame to be here and work all the time and miss out on that aspect of the city life. Megan also brought up, that sort of blurred line between work and social activity, and my job involves a lot of that, a number of evening events, dinners, and lunches throughout the week and even on weekends. And as Megan brought up, technically that is work, but all of those people also become your real friends too. And so it ceases to be an obligation to be at these events. And it's, oh, I get to see my friend who works in so-and-so's office, or I get to see, the congressman from, whatever district who you built a strong relationship with. And it's enjoyable to go spend an evening, at a bar or restaurant with those people. And sometimes that's where you come up with your most creative, off-the-cuff, innovative ideas. It's outside of a traditional meeting structure, and you can bounce ideas off of each other. And some things may not work, some things may end up turning into a really new, interesting project. And without that social connection to the person, sometimes that comfort level wouldn't be there to bounce crazy ideas off of each other or whatever it may be. I think there's things that get accomplished in a more casual setting like that than necessarily can get done in a half-hour meeting during the day.
Great point. I see the DC lifestyle kind of, meshing from personal to professional. So those are great examples of how work can also give you some personal enjoyment too. Fantastic. So Camille, are there any particular questions that have come in from some of our viewers?
Hello. Yes, there are. Let me pull it up real fast. So this question is to all speakers, and let's see. I'll just go ahead and read the text. So I'm a former student athlete, football, from the U of O with degrees in geography and political science. I left the U of O and pursued a career in coaching. I've spent the last 6 years coaching and was fortunate enough to earn a Master's of Science in Education this past fall. I've decided that I want to make a career change from coaching into government. As I have begun my search, it's clear that I don't have the real-world experience needed, which leads to my question. What types of jobs would I be qualified for with my educational background in geography and political science and a master's? And how do I get a start in politics and government with this, without current experience, but with my educational experience?
Yeah, and all of us started out without any experience, and we all came from different backgrounds. Like I mentioned, I studied economics and business and Spanish, so certainly nothing to do with politics directly. I think that, and sometimes this is frustrating to hear, that there isn't a specific formula, right? There are many different ways to get to your end goal of being involved in government. And I think that the first and easiest path is to make strong connections in that space, and the best way to do that probably is some sort of volunteer work. We're going into a campaign season. There's ample opportunities to work on campaigns. That's a great way to meet people who are involved in various levels of politics. It also doesn't hurt if you admire someone in state politics, in federal politics. I think that you would be surprised how receptive they and their staff would be to someone saying, I admire this work that you've done. Here's the perspective that I bring. I want to learn from you. Can you sit down and meet me for coffee for 30 minutes one day? I think you'd be very surprised to the extent to which they would be willing to sit down with you. And that's step one to making possibly a lasting connection with that person that could end up with a role in their office, or it could end up, as Megan mentioned, that they connect you to someone else within their network who's able to give you that foot in the door.
This is Travis. I'd just add, I agree with everything that Michael said. That's absolutely right. I just chime in and say that careers aren't linear, and sometimes you have to take a step back so you can make 5 steps forward. And there are lots of opportunities, whether it's in government or public policy, where you might have to intern. You might have to go and build a network in that field before you get the opportunity. And just from my personal experience, I graduated again from the University of Oregon. I moved to Washington, D.C. I took a 3-month unpaid internship with Congressman DeFazio. I gave constituents tours. I answered the phone. I wrote mail. I did it for free. In fact, I paid to do it. I had to pay room and board in Washington, D.C. just to intern for the congressman. But I made those connections, and I showed that nothing was beneath me. I worked hard. I showed that I was ambitious, and I wanted to help and make a difference. And that opened up an opportunity in the future for having opportunity. So with coaching and having a master's, I think at the end of the day, the way that I know Congressman DeFazio, for example, I think they're looking for smart, creative, passionate people who want to make a difference. And if you can demonstrate that, you don't have to have the on the paper experience that you need otherwise in another job to get into one of those positions. I think, like Michael said, you make those connections, you reach out, you build some relationships, and you show that you want to make a difference, you want to make a change, you're committed to your community. That's what's going to impress a member of Congress, if politics is your thing, more than anything else.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Michael and Travis said. You know, the first step is to talk to someone that currently has a job in the area that you're interested in and get their advice. And I don't know what the Republicans do, but Democrats, I mean, it has been a problem in the past that it's been hard to find job postings on Capitol Hill because so much of it's done internally. And at least the Democratic Party and leadership has made an effort to be transparent about the hiring process. So, you know, Steny Hoyer, who's the majority whip, if you go to dem.gov or to that website, there's an online resume bank, and they do job postings, and it's publicly available because they do want to get the best candidates. And you know, before on Capitol Hill, it was so much you have to know someone to get into an office, and now I think that they're doing a much better job of being transparent in the hiring process and opening it up to the most qualified candidates. And if you're looking for jobs at federal agencies, there's also a resume bank that you can go through, usajobs.gov. So I would just recommend talking to someone and then also just going on those resume banks and posting your resume so that offices and agencies have access to it. And you never know, you know, what can come of it. Someone might reach out to you.
And I would just add on top of all of that, you cannot be timid about this, right? There are so many savvy people with great resumes trying to get into political positions, whether they're state, local, federal. On top of, you know, having an impressive resume, as Travis mentioned, that doesn't have to be impressive political experience. It's impressive accomplishments wherever they are. You have to be the one that is calling the office. You have to be the one that goes to the office and introduces yourself to the person at the front desk. You don't be obnoxious, but you show initiative. Do something to set yourself apart from everyone else who's vying for those positions, because, you know, as someone who has looked at resumes for interns and other positions, it is an incredibly competitive and incredibly saturated environment. But if you are the one that is setting yourself apart and staff says, you know, this is the guy who's showing a lot of effort, this is the kind of effort he's going to put into the job, it's pretty easy to put yourself above the rest of the resume pile.
And I'll also just add real quickly too, especially for people that have a master's degree and have the education but not necessarily the work experience, there are some fellowships on Capitol Hill. So it's a little bit different than internships. The fellowships, you're doing legislative work. Some of them are paid not by the personal office of the congressman, but by outside groups, like say an environmental group might sponsor a fellowship. So I would look into those opportunities as well, because they're looking for people that have the education, but also, you know, may need the work experience, and you get to work directly on legislation that way too.
Great. Any other questions, Camille?
Yeah, there's one other one. Is there a piece of advice you wish you had received as a young professional trying to make your way in a competitive job field and in a new place? Can all of you speak to that?
Yeah, I learned it eventually, but I wish that it had been instilled earlier, you know, by a mentor or someone, to say that it is much better to come up with bold, innovative ideas and not have them work than to sit on the sidelines and wait for something to come your way, wait for an interesting opportunity to come your way. I think that a lot of times, as a young professional, you look around you, you see much more senior people, and you want to make sure to not ruffle any feathers, right? You just want to put your head down and do your job and impress people. I think more and more, particularly in technology fields, but this is starting to be the case in a lot of other areas, people are prizing big ideas. And they want an innovative mindset. They want someone that's going to take an initiative to create something new, push things in a new direction. And part of that process is failing a number of times and keeping up enough confidence that if you had a couple big ideas that didn't work out, that is okay. That's actually better than not proposing them at all. And sooner or later, one of these is going to be fruitful, and that ends up carrying you much farther in your career than if you simply take the path of absolutely no risks whatsoever.
This is Travis. As a former staffer and now as an employer, there's nothing that impresses me more than someone who's a hard worker, who's diligent, who shows up and just does the job and is always looking to demonstrate initiative and take on projects. That's undervalued in the workforce, is someone who's just willing to go do the work. And so that's advice that I wish I would have had. It's just demonstrate what you want through how hard you're able to work. But probably a better piece of advice that I wish I would have had is to be thoughtful about your career, because as you make steps in your career, you can get pigeonholed and you can get off track. And to me, the person who really stands out is the person who's plotting 5 years into the future or 10 years into the future and really being thoughtful about how they move through their career. For me, I knew that I wanted to go back to Oregon eventually, but I knew that I had to go to Washington, D.C. to get the experience that I wanted. I tried to link myself to a member of Congress from Oregon, obviously, so I could maintain Oregon connections. Try to get involved in issue sets that had a Oregon connection. Natural resource issues, energy issues, they're parochial in nature. They're not global. They're not national per se. They have a direct link to home. So I tried to build an expertise in issues that I knew that I could bring back to Oregon. So trying to plot out those steps 5 or 10 years in advance will set you apart.
And I'll just add, sort of similar to Travis, I think I wish I had been more prepared. I think it's always good to have both short-term goals and long-term goals when you're thinking about your career, because a job is just not going to come to you. Sometimes it does, but usually it requires a lot of hard work and a lot of calculated decisions, and you can't start planning those steps until you decide, okay, here's what I want to do, and I'm going to make it happen. The other thing for, recent grads just starting out is be humble and don't be so discouraged. You are going to have to do whatever job is handed to you. And when I first moved to DC, I basically spent almost 3 years answering phones and sitting at the front desk. And that's not the most glamorous job, but if you stick with it, it will pay off. And, the congressman recognized my hard work. And the same thing will happen to you. If you're willing to do any job and be a team player, you will get rewarded for that.
Great. Camille, any final questions from Camille?
Nope, that's all, James.
Okay, great. So we are nearing the end of our program, but I just have maybe another final question or two to ask our speakers. And I do want to remind people that after this formal presentation webinar, we will all move over to the virtual networking space where you as an attendee can have one-on-one text-based chats with our speakers and also with other ducks who are interested in politics and public policy, for the hour after this particular program. So this is for Travis, Megan, and Michael. On this webinar, or as attendees, we actually do have some current students. So, adding on to the previous advice that you were giving Is there anything you would recommend for those lucky students who are still on campus, still have access to all the campus-based resources? So this question is, what would you encourage them to do that you either did as a student and you were so happy you did, or that you wish you would have done had you been at that particular time? And as a complement to this question, I'd also love to hear your thoughts about when you look at your career in the next 4, 5, 6 years, how are you sort of taking care of yourself? How are you planting the seeds, exploring options, developing those mentoring relationships? Because as we know, the career is a journey, not a destination. We're always somewhere in that journey. So I think it would be interesting to hear what you're planning for your future. But starting with advice for students, and then sharing what you're thinking about for your near future as well too. So if it's okay, Travis, maybe if I could ask you to start.
Sure. Well, I think my advice for students just generically would be to always do the hard thing, to challenge yourself, to stretch yourself. That's always going to make you better and more employable. And that's something that someone told me when I was a student at the University of Oregon. Oops, looks like can you still hear me?
You were breaking off for a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind repeating the highlights again. Oh, we see you now, so if you wouldn't mind maybe trying your response again.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. No. The best advice that I ever got was to challenge yourself and stretch yourself. And students have this incredible environment where they're exposed to a lot of diversity, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different experts. And I can't encourage you enough to use this time you have at the university to seek out advice, to talk to as many people as you can, to talk to as many professionals as they can, explore their careers, ask them questions, try to figure out what you want to do. Try to create in your mind what that perfect job would be, and work backwards. Even if that perfect job is 20 years into the future, what steps can you take now? What things can you pursue that link to that potential perfect job down the road? I think that's crucial, and it really is about living intentionally and pursuing a career intentionally and building those steps up to eventually what your dream job is. In terms of what I'm doing right now, I just took this job about 6 months ago, and so my intent is to spend the next 5 to 8 years building this association, building this organization. It's an incredible opportunity, and I use the last 8 years in my job already. I've used every single skill that I learned in Washington, D.C. in this job. I hope to build on those skills with management, budget, and advocacy, and then in 8 more years, 5 years, see what leads me and pursue potentially a different opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Travis, and we wish you a lot of luck, too. So, Megan, advice for students and also insight into your future.
Well, U of O is such an incredible resource, and the town of Eugene, too. So when I was a student, from the time I was a freshman, I was always involved in some of the student groups. I used the Career Counseling Center at U of O. I did a summer internship in D.C. my sophomore year, so I really recommend doing an internship while you're in college, especially if you're thinking about D.C., because you want to make sure it's the right fit for you. And then just also networking with the local community. Some of the groups that I work with now in the Congressman's office, local Eugene groups, I actually volunteered for when I was a student at U of O on different issues and campaigns. So there's so many resources in Eugene. It's a very politically active community, even just networking too with your professors who can help you find opportunities. I think it's important to use all those things and tools at your disposal right there in Eugene, because university towns are unique in that way. And then I would say, like I said earlier, when it's your senior year, start preparing, think about what your next steps, and prepare early. If you have to do an internship, which you might have to do if you can't find a paid job, then start saving money or working during college to save that money so you can get your foot in the door. and then talking to people that have been there and finding that mentor before you make a move. And then as for me right now in my career, working for the congressman has actually introduced me to a lot of new issues that I've become passionate about. So I was an international studies major at U of O and thought, well, I'm going to do the Peace Corps and join the Foreign Service. And now I'm more interested in other issues and domestic issues. And I've become really interested in agriculture and trade. And so I can see myself, you know, once I leave Capitol Hill, developing a career in those areas and doing something similar to what Michael and Travis has done. So it's not something that I ever would have thought, but when you have a job, you become passionate about new things, and you know your career takes new directions, and that's exciting.
Great, thank you, Megan. Last but not least, Michael.
Yeah, for current students, I think that the bigger piece of advice for me would be to think consciously about what you will only be able to do during your time in college and take advantage of those opportunities. You know, the first and foremost, go study abroad. Take this opportunity to disappear for 3 or 6 months, go gain a radically new experience, make yourself uncomfortable, force yourself into a new situation. You'll learn a lot about yourself, you'll learn a lot about a new place, and you'll meet wonderful people. There is a situation where it's a win-win. There is no downside to doing that, in my opinion. And it's one of those opportunities, you don't have that when you leave college. That infrastructure doesn't exist anymore. So take advantage of it. And also, in that vein, and a little bit less fun, but very fruitful, don't underestimate people's interest in connecting with students, with professionals' interest in helping a student, with mentoring a student. You know, I always thought when I was a student, often in situations that, like, oh, you know, I'm 20 years old. Like, who in their 40s established in their career wants to talk to me? Who cares what I am working on? Who cares what I'm interested in? It very much isn't the case now that I'm on the other side and you hear from students and you hear from recent graduates about trying to get advice, trying to get help establishing themselves in a career. People like myself, and it's not just anecdotal, everyone around me, everyone that I know in professional situations is constantly helping out younger individuals from their school, from their professional network. So don't be shy about making that first connection. That people actually will be very, you know, accommodating and very interested in helping you out. And frankly, you know, it's a little bit cynical, but if you are a younger student, start when you're a sophomore or a junior. If you know you're starting this when you're in your last semester of your senior year, people are just going to think, oh, they want a job, and I might not have a job for them. If you're starting your sophomore year or junior year, people will think, wow, this is a really savvy student who's got a great head on their shoulders, who's getting out ahead and trying to meet professionals. Like, what an interesting person. Maybe when I have a summer internship come up, like, they're the ones that I'm going to think about. So don't hesitate to start early. As far as what I'm doing, my constant is that I'm always trying to create something new. You know, I just started here at Consumer Technology Association a year and a half ago, and you know, the new thing that I'm creating here is, you know, our sharing economy portfolio. And those issues are just beginning on a federal level. You know, you see a lot of news about, you know, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, all of those companies having policy issues play out at a state and local level. But there are years and years of policy debates ahead that we can help shape to make sure that people, you know, both participants, you know, people providing services, and users, you know, getting services via these platforms, continue to enjoy all the fruits and benefits of them, you know, in a way that comports with current laws, or possibly thinking about what new laws you need to be putting in place. So there's a pretty big horizon there. I don't anticipate that one being resolved in the next year. I think that'll keep me busy for at least the near term.
Fantastic. So with that, let me start wrapping up. I want to say on behalf of the University of Oregon Alumni Association, our 27,000 members, and the countless other alums that are out there, thank you, Michael, Megan, and Travis, for being such passionate Ducks, such willing, eager advocates for students as well as your alumni peers. You are what the Duck Career Network is all about, the collective support for each other's professional and also personal advancement. So again, I can't thank you all enough. I also want to mention that we had a great perspective on DC on the work here. I know that we have alums who represent other geographies, other political persuasions. So whatever your interest, your passion, your thinking is, just know that Ducks are going to be out there and they're going to be eager to help you, especially if you share their interests, their passions, as was referenced before. Just genuinely, they're going to want to help you and they're going to want to contribute to your success, because it will at some point also be an asset to them as well too. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. I will let you know that when I end this WebEx broadcast, the website for the virtual networking event will automatically pop up. So if you have already registered, all you have to do, or activated your account, all you have to do is sign in, and then you will be able to move on to that virtual networking platform. You will find there are 2 booths, virtual booths, in this networking space. One is where you can get into line, into a queue, to be matched with either Michael or Megan or Joseph or Travis, and in 8-minute increments you'll be able to shift and talk with another one of the speakers. You might also be able to talk with one of the alums as well too. So have a great time. I do also encourage you, you can also get in line at the same time in the other booth, which is to just meet other Ducks. You just never know who knows who. You might both find that you're in the same state. Again, the whole notion of networking is you never know who knows who, so why not start with start the connection with a Duck. And one final bit of request for Michael, Megan, and Travis: if in your virtual booth you get matched with each other, there is an option to, you might just say, hello, talk to you later, and then end the conversation, because if you're talking to each other, that means some of the other attendees won't have a chance to talk with you. So I know you can find each other, so if you happen to get matched with each other, just please move on to the next conversation. One final question for Michael, Megan, and Travis: would it be okay for people to reach out to you either via LinkedIn or through me if they have individual questions for you? Could I get a quick response from Michael? Is that okay?
Certainly, yeah. LinkedIn is a great way to reach me.
Great. And then Megan?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. And Travis?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So again, I can't thank you all enough. With the 3 of you, I will follow up and circle back with you after the event. Maybe I'll give you a break because you've given us so much time today. So I'll follow up with you maybe tomorrow or even early next week. But on behalf of the collective University of Oregon alumni community, thank you so much for sharing of your time, your expertise. The program is not over. Let's move over to the virtual networking space so people can have one-on-one text-based chats. Have a great day, and go Ducks.
Great. Thanks, James.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Okay. And let me get to the point where I can end the event, and you will see it pop up just momentarily. So see you all soon. Goodbye.